Hey everybody, Coach Toolshed here, and in today's video I'm going to be bringing you my review for Fallout 76. And as with all reviews here on Coach Toolshed Gaming, you can rest assured that I have taken the time to fully beat the game before posting my review. In the case of Fallout 76, this review is coming in early 2021. The game has now been out for almost 2.5 years, and the game has gone through a couple of major content updates. And so we're going to check in on the game now in 2021 after it's gone through the Wastelanders update, the Steel Dawn update, the One Wasteland update, all that. We're going to check out how the game is now. I'm sure some of you have seen online the claims that the game is really good now or such to that effect, and we're going to dive into it. I decided now's the time to get into it. We're in a bit of a gaming release drought right now here at the start of the year. Hasn't really been too much to come out at all this year so far, so I said now's the perfect time. I had a friend who I saw had picked up the game and was playing it, so I jumped in and decided to see if the game has improved at all since I covered it back in 2018. And while I can say that yes, the game is in an improved state, there's still a lot to talk about here. So let's get right into the review for Fallout 76 in 2021. So first and foremost, let's discuss what the game has evolved into at this point after a couple of years on the market. What you can essentially find if you are a player who's coming into the game, if you've never played it before, but maybe you've played the older Fallout games, you're expecting maybe a more typical Fallout experience, which is what some of the news outlets might have given you the impression that the game is at this point. Unfortunately, that's not what you're going to find. This is not a classic Fallout game. Sure, it has the veneer and the facade of Fallout 4, and the gameplay is essentially the same as Fallout 4 as well. But what you're going to find is it's a lot more involved with going around and doing daily missions and doing side missions and grinding for resources and collecting junk than anything you found in Fallout 4. In this game, you do not have the option to ignore collecting scrap or anything like that. You have to buy in to the survival aspect of crafting your gear, maintaining your gear, which breaks frequently. You have to eat and drink and all that. We're going to discuss that more in depth in a little bit. One of the things that you have to keep in mind if you're a new player coming into this game is that it is attempting to do a couple of different things at once, and it doesn't really succeed in fulfilling any of them. It's trying to be a survival game in a Fallout world, and it just doesn't quite live up to what you might find in other survival titles. That's the problem. It's lacking a lot of features you might see in other survival type games. So it's trying to skate by with this Fallout veneer, which it does get away with to an extent. The soundtrack, the music, the locations, the enemies, it certainly does have that aesthetic. And if you are a player who's dying to play some new Fallout content, you might get some of what you're looking for as far as just the raw aesthetic going. But what the game boils down to, once you complete the vanilla story missions and the DLC missions that have been added to the game, is you have a game where it's just a brutally unrewarding gameplay loop. What you're going to find is after you've done the main story missions and the side missions in the game, and you're going into the end game, all you really have to do is set off nukes in a couple of different locations, and you'll see that everyone who's playing the game on the public servers is doing the same thing every single day. The hardcore players who sign in and play this every day are setting off nukes at either Monogamine or down in the Cranberry Bog, and that is what you will see happening 90% of the time. What players do, they sign in, they take over a workshop out in the world, which takes a few minutes, then they go and they try to set off a nuclear launch, and then a bunch of players, usually sometimes half the server will go, which is about 10 to 12 players, will go to one of these particular locations and try to shoot down one of these 3-star high-level enemies and hope against hope that Bethesda rewards them with a loot drop that they can actually use, which is rarely the case. Unfortunately, there's really not much else to do in the endgame. It's very unrewarding because all you can do is hope that you'll find a 3-star legendary enemy either at one of these nuke drop sites or out in the world that will give you a drop that you can actually use. It's very rare. Case in point, once I hit level 50, I played all the way another 100 hours or so and didn't get any drops that were higher than what I already had at level 50. A friend of mine gave me some gear, and I didn't find any way to increase the power of my character the entire time as far as gear drops go. That's a lot of playing without getting anything to drop through RNG that is actually useful. In fact, I can't think of another game. Go down the list of all the other looter shooter games of this type where the only way to progress past a certain point really is to get better gear. And in the case of Fallout 76, I have to say it's the worst in the genre by a mile. Combine that with the fact that the gameplay itself, as I mentioned earlier, it's very similar to Fallout 4. Now, it works okay if you're just playing a single-player RPG in an open world. It definitely lags behind the gunplay and the melee combat of other games, even when you compare it to the RPG genre. But when you compare it to other looter shooters like Destiny or Borderlands 3 or The Division or any other game of its ilk, even moderate, bad sort of looter games like Godfall, even the combat in those games is at least good to great. The problem with Fallout 76 is the gameplay itself is not enough to keep you playing with the monotonous and awful, brutally unrewarding endgame. And it just sort of collapses in on itself. Because of the survival nature of the game too, you're never going to have enough ammo for your weapons unless you're crafting it yourself. That's going to compound with the fact that you're going to run out of crafting components very quickly. You're not going to have enough lead. You're not going to have enough gunpowder unless you go out and farm this stuff. That's why a lot of players take over workshops. Problem with taking over workshops is you have to use a bunch of components to take over the workshop and craft different resource mining material and defenses so that it doesn't get taken down in an attack. That is another issue. But your workshops will also get attacked constantly while you're out in the world. So while you're passively trying to gather resources through workshops, enemy waves will come in and attack it and destroy your stuff when you have to go back and repair it again with more components. And you also have the same issue with your gear, with your armor, with your weaponry. Your armor is going to break down constantly. You have multiple different pieces that you're wearing at any given time. Every time you go out and do a mission, you do 1 or 2 missions and guarantee you a piece of your armor is going to break. Problem is, once you get past level 30 or so, there's a particular component called ballistic fiber, which is a very rare drop, which you are required to use every single time you repair your armor. Now, it's something that you have to do constantly throughout the game. You'd think that the game would actually make the components that you need be at least a semi-common sort of drop, but in certain locations, certain items that you need for repairing your gear, whether it be adhesive or anything like that, especially with ballistic fiber, players will find, is that the game does not give you enough drops. You have to go actively seek it out, and it just turns into a vicious cycle where a piece of your armor breaks, you have to go find ballistic fiber. While you're going out trying to hunt for ballistic fiber, another piece of your armor breaks. Then you find a little bit of ballistic fiber, hopefully it's enough to repair one piece of your armor, and then another piece breaks. And it becomes so annoying to play. It's not even that it's hard to play this game. It's not overly challenging. The problem is the annoyance level when everything's constantly breaking on you at a ridiculous rate. You run out of food and water at a ridiculous rate, and you can't just eat a steak dinner and drink a thing of water to fill up. No, you have to drink 5 bottles of water and eat 5 steaks in order to fill up your hunger meter. I mean, it's absurd. The way the survival aspects, it all folds together into a completely unenjoyable type of a mess of a game. Even for someone like me who used to love playing the old Fallout games. The gameplay in the game, as I mentioned, has never been the strong suit for Fallout games. And Bethesda games from Bethesda Game Studios in general are very weak when it comes to gameplay mechanics, combat mechanics. And with the endgame being so unrewarding, and the fact is, the only way you can have enough components and enough space to do what you need to keep enough crafting components on hand to maintain a healthy amount to keep yourself full on enough stock so you're not going to have to worry about these sort of components is if you buy into the Fallout First subscription package that Bethesda offers. You see, all of the issues with the game, whether it be food, or weapon degradation, or armor degradation, or stash space running out of that, even though it has improved from when it first launched, the stash space has increased tremendously, but it's still not quite enough. You can play for a couple weeks and still fill it up rather quickly because you need so many different components on hand at any time to repair your gear and to repair your defenses and to craft new stuff for your workshops. Even if you bundle up all the stuff in your stash, you're still going to run out of space very quickly. And all of these issues, all of the major player complaints can be fixed through the Atomic Shop. See, Bethesda sells repair kits for your gear. They sell scrap kits. With the Fallout 1 subscription, it allows the players to go and set up a secondary camp space, a secondary tent out in the world, so they don't have to worry about lugging all their stuff back to camp. They can just deposit it and move on. They can go around and have unlimited crafting capacity for all their components, and that is one of the key parts of the end game. This is an end game that revolves around collecting junk. Quite literally, collecting junk is probably the primary focus of the entire end game, because if you're not getting good drops, the only thing you really have to look forward to is to get some of the rare crafting components that you need to repair your gear. It's pathetic. I've never seen a game like this, really. And that's not a good thing. It's unique in a bad way. I've played through the old days of Destiny where you weren't getting any good drops for hours on end. In this game, like I said, you can go 50 levels without getting a good drop. One of the buddies I was playing with, he's up around level 500, and as I was playing with him, he got all excited. He said, "Finally, this is the drop I've been waiting for." And he was almost level 500, playing all that time just trying to get one weapon to drop. And like I said, once you get the weapons and the rolls that you want on the weapons, then you have this limited, focused endgame, where all you're going out to kill a Scorch Beast Queen, or they're going to Monaga Mine. That's what pretty much every high-level player's trying to do as they're playing the game. And all the high-level players are subscribed to Fallout First. Now, it's not a knock on them. It's not a choice I would make. It's a knock on the game itself, because if you're going to be dedicating time to this game, it only benefits you to put in more money to subscribe to the Fallout First service. I think it's $15 a month or $100 for the year. Now, $15 a month to me for one game to subscribe to me, it is nuts. I can subscribe to that on Game Pass on Xbox and get over 200 games access to. This is just a subscription service to one particularly poorly executed game, where if you look at all the different components of the game, they're well below industry standards. Gameplay is well below other first-person shooters. The gunplay and the combat is well below. The graphics are clearly over a decade behind the industry standard for a AAA game. It's really pathetic. I'm not going to harp on it. This has been discussed ad nauseum over the years, is how bad Bethesda graphics are. And in 2021, it's even more noticeable how bad they really are, especially when you're playing it on some newer hardware. But as you're playing the game, what you're going to keep running into is roadblock after roadblock after roadblock to your progression. The ammo that you use for your weaponry is not going to get replaced at a commensurate rate to how much you're going to be expending, especially if you're going to fight the higher level enemies. You can use thousands of rounds of ammunition and then get a handful of bullets back in return. And then you have to go farm for hours for enough crafting components to craft enough ammo to go out and do it again. It's really, I honestly do not understand how players are getting hooked into this gameplay loop, because it is brutal. It is unfulfilling. It is unrewarding. It is one of the worst looter loops I've ever seen. And by the numbers, most players don't get sucked into it. If you look, most people haven't even hit level 50, let alone level 100. So most players that do pick up this game don't get that far, because it is such a slog. Something else you'll find is as you grow in level, your player actually gets weaker compared to the world around you. I actually created two characters for my playthrough. I have one character up over level 100, one around level 40. And when I started the secondary character, what I noticed was instantly I was taking enemies down much, much quicker. Now, obviously, you're going to have easier enemies for a lower level character. But when I can take out enemies at level 1 in 1 or 2 shots, and the same type of base level enemy at level 100 requires me to unload a full round and then reload and put more bullets into the enemy, you have a major balancing issue. This is a problem that I also saw with the way ZeniMax handled Elder Scrolls Online, another Bethesda Softworks published game. They make lower level players sort of buffed up. They don't show it on the screen. Your damage markers aren't going to show it, but you are buffed, apparently, compared to the higher level players, because you can just take out enemies at a much higher rate. And when you're out traveling in a group, the enemies you see in front of you, you'll be able to take them out a little bit easier than the players you're with sometimes, because you're doing more damage to certain enemies. It's kind of weird, and it was very noticeable when I went from a level 100 character back down to a character in the single digits, is how much easier the combat was at lower levels. And then as you get higher, you think you'd be getting stronger as you get higher in level, and it's just not the case. And you never get stronger as the game goes on. You just get weaker and weaker, and it's a war of attrition. And when your armor breaks, and you're constantly having to go out to farm for stuff, it slows down all progression if you actually want to go out and do story missions, if you want to go out and explore. You constantly are having to schlep back to your camp to make repairs. It's just not a fun gameplay cycle. And if you want to make as much progress as possible, you have to go into the atomic shop. Now, to be fair, in the interest of full transparency, the game, when you first start playing, will reward you with a good amount of atoms. I think I earned probably about $40 worth of atoms throughout my gameplay time. But as I've mentioned in a previous video, this is the law of diminishing returns with this. You will get showered with currency for the atomic shop at the start of the game, and as you get closer and closer towards the end game, it will start to dry up rapidly, and you'll have to actively go search for them. Now, the game has added some what's called a scoreboard system, which is kind of how the daily missions and the daily challenges come into effect. The game every day will rotate and give you a fresh list of things to do, and you can earn what's called scoreboard points as you go through. This is basically a battle pass for Fallout 76, except you don't have to buy into it. Every player that has the game will have access to the scoreboard, and there's 100 different levels to it. It's very typical sort of battle pass procedure. You'll have a different either cosmetic or some sort of reward that you'll get as you go through and complete the different daily challenges. But this is another area where the game sort of collapses in on itself. When you have a game that has more than, say, 2 or 3 types of currency that it uses, you've gone too far and you've created a poorly designed economy. Fallout 76 has at least 7 different types of currency that I could think of. It has atoms that you spend in the atomic shop. It has caps, which is sort of the gold of the world that's used to buy stuff from vendors. There's legendary scrip, which is used to purchase random legendary items from a legendary vendor down in the southern part of the map, and you can earn that from turning in legendary weapons to a vending machine. There's something called perk points, which you get from breaking down the perk cards. You get 2 points for that, and you can use those to upgrade your legendary cards later on. We're going to talk about that in just a second. There's also a completely useless currency called treasury notes. Why is it useless? Because treasury notes, their only function is used to transform into another type of currency called gold bullion. Why the game doesn't just reward you with gold bullion for your missions, I don't know. But it literally rewards you with these things called treasury notes, which you have to take to a vending machine and convert them into gold bullion. And then you use the gold bullion to buy stuff from the gold bullion vendor. It is completely convoluted, and it just shows a complete lack of focus to the game design. And every time they introduce one of these new updates, they add one of these new ridiculous type of currencies to the game instead of just having something that's universal. Just have caps and atoms. You don't need to have all this other stuff. But instead it feeds into the mindset of you constantly have to be doing stuff in this game in order to make any sort of progress. Now, I wanted to talk about those perk points. So, the perk card system that the game uses, you earn perk cards for every level up, and then once you hit certain milestones, you get a pack where you'll earn 4 different cards. Now, these are used for your loadout, the special system. This has been discussed before. I'm sure many of you who are familiar with Fallout know what I'm talking about. But in Fallout 76, you take these cards and you assign them to your loadout based on your special points. what happens is once you hit level 50 and then level 75 and then level 100 and so on, you will get these cards called legendary cards. Now, to fully upgrade these cards, it costs 300 perk points. The perk cards that you break down, you get 2 points per card, meaning to fully upgrade just one of these legendary cards, you have to break down 150 perk cards. And as I said, you only get one card per level. And once you hit the higher levels, that's all you're going to get. You sometimes can get rewarded with perk card packs for doing daily challenges and whatnot. But again, it's a pittance. And that is emblematic of the entire economy of the game. Everything in this game costs way more than it should. And compounding that fact is the fact that the game throws roadblocks up to how much you can actually earn. The vendors, if you have a bunch of stuff you want to sell, well, the vendors don't have enough caps for you. So you can sell off everything you have to sell. The vendor will be out of money for a full 24 hours. You got to wait till the next day. Same thing with the legendary vendors. You can only turn in so many legendary weapons a day before the vending machine stops spitting out script. Same thing with the amount of gold bullion you can acquire in a day. You are capped by the amount that's in the vending machines. Why does the game do this? Well, because of everything else. Bethesda's trying to slow down everyone's progress. It's emblematic of the entire game. You can see it in every single aspect of the game. All of it is trying to slow you down. All of it is trying to push you towards getting stuff from the Atomic Shop. Now, players who have the Follow First package also get rewarded with atoms. You see how this works? So that way those players will be like, I always have a ton of atoms. And they'll go and they'll evangelize, and you'll see people online telling you, I get showered with atoms. I always have plenty of money for this stuff. That's because a lot of the players, in fact, all of the players that I actually played with are subscribed to the service. I did not partake, obviously. That's not my bag. But that's what Bethesda wants. And the hardcore players that play this game every day are going along for the ride. Unfortunately, I wish they didn't do it because I don't like that business model. I don't like to see people supporting it. But hey, that's a personal decision. And if I'm sitting there and looking at it, if I was someone who wasn't going to play it every day, I would feel pressured to do the same thing. And I probably would give into it if it was probably the only game I was playing. But let's move on. There's other things to discuss here with this delightful game. It might sound like I'm complaining a lot, and that I don't really have much good to say about the game. And that's because I really don't. See, I used to love Bethesda games. I used to be a huge fan. I've done videos about this in the past. In fact, Fallout 76 is definitely the game that I've covered the most in the past. You'll find many videos that I did about this game before it came out in 2018. I was highly skeptical about it. I decided to give it a fair shot. I decided to jump in and see what the game has to offer. And what I found was the game has just not evolved enough. Even the new addition of the NPCs, the mission structure, has not changed. And the mission structure from the previous iteration of the vanilla game was horrendous. This is how almost all, not all, 75% of the missions, though, probably play out like this. You'll receive some sort of notice on your radio. There'll be some sort of transponder or radio frequency that you have to turn into, and then you'll go and find either a robot or a computer terminal or now a human NPC that you'll find out in the world that needs some sort of help. They'll send you out on a fetch quest to go and get something. You'll bring it back. They'll tell you it's broken. You'll have to go out and find something to fix it. Then when you come back, they said, oh, I just realized I need something else. Could you also go out and get this? And then you'll bring that back, and they said, oh, while you were out, I realized I need a third thing. Can you go out and get that? And when you come back, they'll say, oh, I realized I need a holotape. Oh, and now the holotape's broken. Can you go get some vacuum tubes to fix this? And that's how almost all of the mission chains play out. There's several different storylines that they classify as main missions. So it's hard to sometimes keep track, but if you follow them all out, that is how all of the chains play out. The Brotherhood of Steel stuff plays out like that. The new allies that you can make in the game, there's a couple of companions, and you can do their missions, and that's how those missions play out as well. Instead of just giving you a big list of things to do, they just keep you on the chain, like go out, come back, go out, come back, go out, come back. And it just turns into a vicious loop, combined with the fact that you constantly having to go out and farm stuff, and it throws up your progression. What you have here is an entirely unfulfilling experience as far as I'm concerned. If you're into survival games, it's not going to be what you're looking for as far as crafting and true survival aspects. It's not going to be there. If you're looking for a Fallout game, there's just not enough meat on the bone there as far as I'm concerned. Even with the addition of certain speech checks and the fact that once you got past the Wastelanders update, they do have some conversations where you go into alone, even if you're in a party, and you can decide how the conversation plays out. There's even two factions at the Crater and Foundation between Raiders and the Settlers, where you can make a couple of decisions there on how those storylines play out, and then you have an ultimate decision on which faction to side with. However, you're not going to make enemies of the other faction, even if you choose to not go and fulfill their part of the storyline and go against them. You're still not going to make enemies. It's not really an RPG still. It's just the facade of one. It's kind of trying, I would say it's 20% survival game, 10% Fallout 4, and 70% of a poorly executed, poorly designed, daily sign-in games as a service looter shooter. So at the end of the day, despite all the reports you might have seen, despite the comments you might have seen online saying, oh, the game is great now, or people making claims that it's fundamentally changed or fundamentally different from when it first came out, that's just not the case. That's simply not true. Yes, the game runs better. Graphically, you're going to see less bugs. With the enemy AI, you're going to see less bugs. However, it still is littered with bugs. The enemies still sink into the floor. You're going to see visual effects blurring in and out, especially at range. You're going to see stuff fading in and out of existence. You're going to see enemies skittering around the map, floating around the map. You're going to see all sorts of stuff like that. The guns sometimes don't work properly. They don't scope in properly. All that. It's not as bad as it was. It's still not good. That goes for everything, I would say, about the game. It's still not a good game. It's not a good Fallout game. It's not a good survival game. It's not a good looter shooter game. I would literally probably rather play any other looter shooter that's on the market right now than this game. And again, I used to be a huge Bethesda fan. I used to be a huge Fallout fan. This game has really taken the shine off the entire franchise for me. I try to give it a good shot. I've put over 250 hours into Fallout 76 at this point. Most of that time spent just here in the last couple months in 2021 trying to see how the game is now. Now, there's more improvements incoming. There's going to be the additions to add more loadout space and new camps and stuff like that. But it still is going to be too little too late. And the fact that there are two major content updates, the Steel Dawn and the Wastelanders update, only add about a day or two's worth of content, and then you're right back to the daily grind. And I gotta tell you, the daily missions are rough. I'm gonna in the video you might have noticed I embedded an entire daily mission. You might have missed it though, because it was only 2.5 minutes long and pretty boring. But that is the extent of what the end game boils down to. You can do the daily missions, or you can go and try to set off the nukes. Like I said, it's just a bad experience. I was annoyed most of the time. You can make the argument, oh, well, it's fun with friends. Okay, that's not an argument. Lots of games can be fun to play with a friend on the mic. That doesn't mean the game is good. And I played this game partly solo and partly in a team. I will say I did have more fun playing in a team, but it also was not enough to overcome my overall annoyance with the game. I'd like to give a shout out to my buddy Ivan and Tony, who helped me out tremendously, giving me drops for one of my characters. My main character gave me a lot of stuff to keep me going, keep me from having to spend a lot of time farming. But on my second character, I did not take any help from them, and I found that it was an incredibly tedious experience trying to get that level up for that character, trying to get the gear, trying to get the crafting components. I still don't have enough ballistic fiber on my second character. I have none. Can't find any. I know where some is, but you gotta wait for the servers to clear up, because sometimes other players have gotten in there and raided it, so you got a server hop as well. I mean, I could go on and on. A lot of other stuff I have to say about the game, you can probably go out and find in some of my original coverage of the game, way back from 2018. I'm not going to bog you down and do 40 more minutes of coverage of the game. I think a lot of the fundamental stuff I had to say about the game, I said a couple years ago. This is my review for 2021 Fallout 76. That's it for me, Coach Toolshed. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Please subscribe. If you want to stay in tune with the channel, head forward. And as always, keep it turned to 11.